The General Assembly finds and declares that fraud involving residential mortgages is at an all-time high in the United States and in Georgia. Mortgage lending institutions and borrowers have suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in losses due to residential mortgage fraud. Homeowners in neighborhoods plagued by mortgage fraud have witnessed the deterioration of their neighborhoods. Fraudulently inflated property values in their neighborhoods have resulted in substantial increases in property taxes. The General Assembly, therefore, concludes that for the protection of the general public, and particularly for the protection of borrowers, homeowners, lending institutions, and the integrity of the mortgage lending process, the Georgia Residential Mortgage Fraud Act shall be enacted.
What could she have had to have done to get 10 years in prison for mortgage fraud?
Hal, I've got to tell you, I start off by asking the students how many of them, after assuring them that no one is in the room and with law enforcement or the real estate commission, how many have actually been involved in a mortgage fraud case. And I'll get maybe one or two or maybe three people who will raise their hand. But after we've gone through the class and explained what mortgage fraud is, I ask the same question, and almost everybody raises their hand. I got to tell you, my friend, if it wasn't for just a little bit of luck, you and I could be in that same place.
Wow, it's hard to believe. Can you imagine everything we've done that could have been mortgage fraud?
Will you stop with that incessant pounding of your head? You're driving me crazy.
I shouldn't be here. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be sitting here.
I didn't get you in here. You're the attorney. You're the one with the education. You should have known better.
All I knew is they passed a check before I could do anything. I got handcuffs only because of you.
For me, you're supposed to be the attorney. You're supposed to know better than this. How could you not know that this was fraud?
How did I know you had your people paying a check at the closing table? Until I saw it happening, I didn't know it was going to happen. I went to law school for 3 years, went an extra year to get a master's of law. All that's down the drain. My family's disgraced.
Your family's disgraced. Kong down in Block C, he was asking me for a picture of you to hang in his cell this morning. They're gonna be disgraced when this is all over. I didn't commit mortgage fraud.
I don't care.
I can't believe you got us in here for 5 years.
Do you know how many other people could be here with us right now?
My name is David McLaughlin. I am a Senior Assistant Attorney General for the State of Georgia Department of Law, also known as the Attorney General's Office. I am in the Special Prosecutions Unit. Our unit prosecutes a variety of white-collar crimes, offenses involving the state departments and agencies, and government corruption. In addition to prosecuting these offenses, we also prosecute crimes such as identity fraud and securities fraud, and most recently, the Georgia law has changed to allow the Attorney General to investigate and prosecute residential mortgage fraud. Prior to May 2005, the state of Georgia did not have a residential mortgage fraud law. As such, no one law enforcement agency or prosecution office was actively involved with the investigation and prosecution of residential mortgage fraud. In 2005, Attorney General Thurbert Baker made it his goal for that year to ensure that the Residential Mortgage Fraud Act was written and passed. Senator William Hamrick out of Carrollton, Georgia, was responsible for carrying the bill and making sure that the legislation was passed. As a result, Georgia became the very first state to have a residential mortgage fraud law. The Attorney General and the district attorneys of this state are authorized now to prosecute residential mortgage fraud. As a result of the new law, that's pretty much all I do. The majority of my cases and the majority of my time is spent working on the prosecution and investigation of residential mortgage fraud. It is important that you understand that no longer in Georgia is residential mortgage fraud just a concept. It is a crime. It is a crime punishable by considerable fines. It is a crime punishable by a considerable amount of time in prison. It is important that you realize in Georgia, when a person uses a misstatement, misrepresentation, or omission in the mortgage lending process, they commit the offense of residential mortgage fraud. And as you can imagine, and as you'll see throughout this DVD, misstatements, misrepresentations, and omissions can occur in any number of ways and in any number of methods. And it's important that you, as a real estate licensee, realize how important it is to be on the lookout for the red flags and the signs of residential mortgage fraud. If you take nothing else with you from this DVD session, remember the words misstatement, misrepresentation, and omission, for they are the essence of residential mortgage fraud. If you find or encounter a misstatement, a misrepresentation, or an omission, you need to ask yourself why. Because the answer in almost every instance is going to be the presence of mortgage fraud. If you're convicted of residential mortgage fraud in Georgia on just one piece of property, on just one misstatement, misrepresentation, or omission, you can be sentenced from 1 year to 10 years in prison and pay up to a $10,000 fine. If you engage in a pattern of residential mortgage fraud, and that's simply defined as 2 or more misstatements, misrepresentations, or omissions on 2 or more properties, then the punishment increases from 1 to 10 years to 3 to 20 years in prison and up to a $100,000 fine per property. We also have a forfeiture provision. The Residential Mortgage Fraud Act provides that the state may seek forfeiture of any and all property used in or derived from the crime of residential mortgage fraud. That means the state can seize from fraudsters and forfeit to the state houses, cars, businesses, money, and anything else used in or derived from the fraud. That's significant. And so a person may not just be looking at prison, but a person may be looking at having everything seized from them that they used or derived from their fraud. In the federal system, punishments can range from a few months to decades in prison. One notorious Atlanta lawyer in 2006 went to prison for 30 years because of her role in residential mortgage fraud. Now, please remember that to be guilty of residential mortgage fraud, you have to knowingly engage in conduct. It's not enough that you merely learned of it later or that you were used by the fraudsters without your knowledge. And that can happen. But I must caution you that as a licensed professional, as a person who knows the industry, who knows the practice, when you encounter the red flags, when you encounter the fraudulent sales contracts, for instance, when you encounter what you know is a fraudulent appraisal, and even if you had nothing to do with the preparation of it, if you take a fee from that closing, you yourself may be guilty of residential mortgage fraud. Where do you report residential mortgage fraud? First and foremost, as a licensee here in Georgia, you should talk to your broker. Tell them what has happened. Tell them what your suspicions are. Tell them what fraud you believe is taking place. You may report residential mortgage fraud on the local level to the district attorneys, to the local municipalities and police departments, or to the sheriff's department. On a state level, you may report it to my office, the Georgia Department of Law. On a federal level, you may report it to the United States Attorney's Office or the FBI. Now, throughout this training video, you will see a number of people essentially role-playing. Some of these play lawyers, agents, brokers. Some of them play people that aren't really on the up and up, people in my world that I generally call defendants. You should please know that everybody in this video has volunteered their time and are merely actors, albeit unpaid actors. Though the scenarios that are represented herein represent true and actual events that I encounter and that they encounter through their day-to-day lives in the mortgage lending industry.
Okay, Scott, I've got all your debts loaded in now. How much is your combined annual income?
$137,000, that's it.
Scott forgot to mention he pays $800 a month child support for his 7-year-old daughter. Does that need to be added to our debt?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
You always forget about that.
Let's look at the numbers. Let's don't add it right now. I'm looking at this and we're a little off.
What do you mean, off?
Don't we qualify?
Well, just hold on now. I just need about $8,000 more in annual income. You have any additional income you haven't told me about?
No, we're both on straight salary. We don't get any overtime either.
What about bonuses? You get annual bonuses?
No.
No, $137,000, that's all we make.
You get annual pay raises?
I wish.
Yeah.
Well, let me get a little creative here. Scott, I'm going to put you in that, and you'll get $6,000 additional pay raise next year, and Donna, I'm going to put you down for additional $3,500 in income. Does that sound reasonable to you two guys?
Is it okay to just guess like that?
Honey, he's just trying to help. That's why Carol sent us to him.
I'm just trying to get you into your house.
Well, Don, I do appreciate all your help. We just haven't done this before.
Give me a minute here. I got the numbers in here. I'm going to run automated underwriting and see what it says. Congratulations, I've got you approved.
Great, Don.
I can't believe we're finally going to own a home.
Well, I've got to call Carol and give her the exciting news, but in the meantime, take this application home, fill it out for me.
Great.
And don't forget about the additional income you and I talked about, okay?
Okay, super. Wow.
He really knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Carol, it's Don. I've got Scott and Donna approved.
Great, Don. Did you have any problems with them?
Well, I had to do something a little creative on the income, but you know how that is.
That's why I sent them to you. I'll get you a copy of the contract faxed right over. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you.
Acts involving residential mortgage fraud occur throughout the mortgage lending process. Some of the steps of the mortgage lending process are not necessarily steps that real estate licensees are involved in. Nonetheless, it's important that we all understand how fraud works throughout the mortgage lending process. One of the biggest areas that we see residential mortgage fraud take place is in the mortgage loan application. This is a document that we're all familiar with. Most people, having bought homes in the past, have filled out a residential mortgage application. Usually we see fraud take place in the loan application process in 2 or 3 main areas. The biggest area being the income of the borrower. Often income is overstated by 5, 10, 20%, sometimes by as much as 100 to 200%. Often we see employment listed for people who don't even have jobs. And while income is often verifiable, there are a variety of mortgage loan programs out there where a borrower may merely state their income and no supporting documentation is needed. Another area on the loan application that we often see fraud is by overstating assets or underreporting debts that a given borrower may have. Misstatements and misrepresentations or omissions regarding income are designed to make the borrower appear to have a greater income than they really have, thus the ability to qualify for greater loans. Not reporting debt or underreporting debt is similarly designed to conceal the borrower's true financial picture. Often, as a real estate licensee, you grow close to the borrowers. You begin to learn things about their family, their employment, and during this process, you will occasionally come to realize that the loan application that the borrower has filled out and has submitted has misrepresentations, misstatements, or omissions.
What do you think about the kitchen?
It's nice. Nice.
This back is beautiful.
It sure is.
Glad you like the back, the patio. I certainly thought this home would make a great addition, Ann and Carlton, to your overall needs in terms of enjoying your children and your grandchildren once you move down from upstate New York.
We think this will make us a great second home. Let's make an offer on it, Ann.
Okay.
Great, I'm going to call your lender this time to get some particulars on your loan so that when we get back to my office, we can write a contract, okay?
Okay, we'll do that.
That's good.
What you think? It's pretty. It's nice. Pretty damn much.
Carlton, no, this is not going to be a second home. The lender thinks it is. I would never spend one day here.
I've told you, Ann, from the very beginning, we're not going to live here. This is going to be an investment for us. It will make a great rental property. We can get at least $500 a month over and above our mortgage after our tenant pays our rent.
Another area of fraud on the loan application involves representing that a property is to be a primary residence versus a secondary residence or an investment property. The reason this is done so frequently in the mortgage lending process is this. In order for a borrower to borrow money for an investment loan, several things happen. Number one, lenders often scrutinize those loans to a much higher degree than they do primary residence loans. Number two, investment property purchases often require a down payment, which the fraudsters rarely have. Number three, the interest rates and the insurance cost of an investment property purchase is much higher. So we see in a majority of the mortgage fraud transactions, the borrower misrepresenting the purpose of the purchase on the loan application, and in most every instance will indicate that the property is to be for their primary residence, even when they know, and you know, that it's for an investment purchase. And in Georgia, again, that would constitute residential mortgage fraud. No discussion of residential mortgage fraud would be complete without a discussion about the victimization of mortgage fraud. Now, we can start off with the obvious, the lenders who lose money because of residential mortgage fraud. If you're a lender and you've lent money on a piece of property that is subject to mortgage fraud, you will lose 37% of the face value of that loan. So the lender is victimized. How is that passed on? That's passed on to everyone, the consumers, through the form of ATM fees, higher interest rates. The consumers directly bear the impact of residential mortgage fraud losses to the lenders. Where else is mortgage fraud felt? In the communities in which mortgage fraud takes place, we see two things happen. First of all, because of the nature of mortgage fraud, rarely does somebody actually move in to the property that's been purchased. Often, when someone does move into the property, it's somebody that's a friend or an acquaintance of the mortgage fraudster, often a criminal themselves. When we see mortgage fraud hit a community, we see crimes such as narcotics, identity fraud, mail theft dramatically increase. So the neighborhoods in which fraud takes place actually become less safe. Also, because nobody moves into the house, because nobody has any real ownership interest in it, the properties themselves sit vacant, become run down, the weeds grow up, and the subdivision as a whole sees a decrease in the inherent property value. On the other hand, because of the mortgage fraud transactions, because these transactions are often 100 to 200% above the true value of the homes in the neighborhoods, we see the property taxes dramatically increase, not just for the homes subject to the mortgage fraud, but to all the other homes in the neighborhoods, and then the adjoining neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. Now, you may find yourself saying, I'm glad I don't live in a subdivision wrecked by mortgage fraud, and I'm not directly victimized. But the truth of the matter is, you are. We all are. You see, you have to understand the nature of the mortgage lending system in the United States. The overwhelming majority of mortgages are immediately sold off on the secondary market. They're bought by companies like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and bundled into what we call mortgage-backed securities, which are sold as securities. Anyone that has a well-diversified 401k portfolio, investment portfolio, or other form of retirement probably has a portion of that backed by mortgage-backed securities. And when fraud is discovered in these securities, the inherent value of the securities is lost. So you can see the impact of residential mortgage fraud isn't just on the shoulders of the lender. It's not just on the shoulders of the subdivision. It's on all of our shoulders. And you as a real estate licensee in particular. Because as the market is hit harder and harder by residential mortgage fraud, it becomes more and more difficult in these subdivisions for real estate agents and licensees to sell and move homes. And I can't overstate this enough. As a real estate licensee in Georgia, right now, today, you're on the front lines of residential mortgage fraud.
Holy moly! What the heck? Hey, Linda, have you ever seen anything like this? I've got a listing appointment in the Wolf Creek subdivision, and these prices just seem to be like all over the place. I've never seen anything like this.
Did you say Wolf Creek?
Yes?
I think Wolf Creek is the subdivision they've been talking about on the news so much that's got all that mortgage fraud.
You're kidding me.
I saw it this morning.
Well, I guess that would explain a lot.
We have 2 small boys, and we have been transferred many times, and we thought this is the house that we will stay in, hopefully for 5 to 10 years. This will be the home that our children will remember. This is our resting place. We have come home. After we'd been in the house about 6 months, we started noticing some odd things that we couldn't explain. We would see houses that the for sale sign would come down, but no one would move into the house. Packages would appear on the front porch, mail would be in the mailbox, cars would come and go, but no one was actually living there. One of the major signs that we noticed was there would be no trash pickup. There'd be different cars coming and going, a lot of dealer tags, a lot of out-of-state tags. People would be there for a week or 2 and then disappear. We decided to have our own neighborhood meeting, get people together, let's meet our neighbors, let's find out what's going on, let's see what the problems are, why aren't these properties being maintained. So we called a neighborhood meeting. We also began to see some foreclosures, and we became very concerned about that. We became very isolated and very suspicious and just had a negative outlook. It took over everything about us. I couldn't sleep at night. We rearranged our children's bedroom. We put our boys in the same room, and we moved their bed so that it wasn't by a window, because I was never sure that there wasn't going to be a drive-by shooting. We had gang fights. Several times, Gwinnett County Police were called because these gangs of teenagers who were all living in these rental properties they were not the fraudsters, but they were the people that were renting the property from the fraudsters. They were the people that were being attracted to these properties. I became reclusive. I wouldn't greet new neighbors until I was able to check into their background, because I didn't trust anyone who moved into this neighborhood. It changed the kind of person I was. It has changed me irrevocably. I will always carry this with me. This house was known as the group home. The detectives had to actually batter the door in when they searched. It has since been used as a drug storage house and is now vacant. This house, the tenant was involved with one of the major drug gangs in Gwinnett County. The tenant in this house printed counterfeit checks in his basement. I will never feel safe and secure about a neighborhood that I move into. I will always be afraid that this is following me.
Methods of residential mortgage fraud have changed over the years. 10 years ago, residential mortgage fraud primarily involved what we all know as flipping. The face of fraud has changed, however, as the industry and law enforcement have become more educated in detecting mortgage fraud. Now, the overwhelming majority of mortgage fraud that we encounter involves fraud on the part of the seller and often the real estate licensee. This fraud often involves inflating contracts or the presence of contract assignments during the negotiation. In this scenario, you will see one of the red flags that a real estate licensee may encounter. That red flag is an assignment contract.
Well, Bill, just as anticipated, you've gotten your first offer on your first listing. This just came across the fax. It's an offer on Country Club Drive. Would you like to take a look at it and see if you have any questions before you present it to the Carters?
Looks good. Full price offer. So I'll get with them this afternoon, see what we can do.
They should be very pleased. Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, Mr. and Miss Carter, we have a contract for the house. It's a full price offer. They're not asking you to pay for any closing costs. They're wanting to use an attorney that I haven't used before, but that should be okay.
Well, that sounds good so far.
Yeah. They want to close in a month, so a quick closing, and they're asking for a home inspection. But since you had it inspected before we listed the home, should be okay.
Right, so the buyer's inspector shouldn't find anything wrong with our home, right, John?
That's right, dear.
Now, this is something unusual. On the special stipulations, page 6, they're asking written permission for it to be assigned. Since the standard contract says that it can't be assigned without written consent, I'm not really sure why they're asking for this.
Why do you think they're asking for that?
We're having a lot of problems with mortgage fraud and lending and real estate, though, so we may want to counter that they remove that special stipulation.
But if they persist, what should we do? We don't want to tie up our home if these aren't the true buyers.
The reason that assignment contracts are a red flag is they are often the first step in a mortgage fraud scheme where the seller of the property is ultimately going to sell their house at a much higher value than they have it listed for or even that they have it contracted for. As I said earlier, the face of mortgage fraud has changed. Now mortgage fraudsters rely on sellers of property to kick back money to the fraudster after the closing, or to agree through the assignment of the contract to accept the list price for themselves and then whatever higher amount the borrower gets for the property to pay them the difference. Again, we call this a kickback, for lack of a better description. In other instances, what we see happen is the seller is asked to validate a false, fictitious, and fraudulent mechanics lien or even a second mortgage used to inflate the price of the property. After the closing, the seller gets what they expected to get, their original asking price. The balance, though, will go back to the fraudster. And this can often be as much as 50%, 100%, or even 200% the original list price of the property. This is very important to you as a real estate licensee, because in order for this form of fraud to work, the fraudster must have a listing, a real estate listing for the fraud value. And that's where you come in. As you'll see in this next scenario, mortgage fraudsters often prey on the seller's need and desire to sell their home. Sometimes a seller is in a financial position where they absolutely have to sell, or maybe they've already moved out and moved across the country. Or, as the scenario will depict, the mortgage fraudster will prey on the seller's personal needs. In doing so, the mortgage fraudster creates a relationship with the seller wherein the seller will kick back money after the closing. And in Georgia, that would be an omission, not disclosed on the HUD settlement statement, not disclosed to the lender, and would constitute residential mortgage fraud.
Greg, you are the man. I mean the man. What a job you did on getting that appraisal to come in just where I wanted it. It's perfect. Yeah, I know it's tight. Now look, just between the two of us chickens here, my underwriter is way too busy to suspect or notice anything. I owe you. And by the way, speaking of that, the buyer's agent is getting ready to direct an entire new subdivision, new homes, 130 of them. Guess what, pal? They're all coming my way. She was just testing me, see how hungry I was. You went over the top for me, but hey, didn't you say you wanted to buy your wife a new Porsche? Well, with the money you're getting ready to make, you'll be able to make that purchase and then some. I'll work out the details soon and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Hello?
Hello. This is John over at Mortgage First. This Red?
Yes, it is. Can I help you?
Hi, Red. My name is John O'Neill. I'm with Mortgage First Lending over in Homeville. Yeah, I'm working with Rich, Indiana, the buyers for your home.
Okay. How can I help you?
Well, listen, we got the appraisal back, and tell you the truth, it's a little higher than the sales price.
I figured it would be. How much higher?
About $30,000.
$30,000. I told Bonnie I thought we had it listed too low.
Well, now, let's think about this. The buyers wanted to be able to buy some furniture and some other things for the house, and I know you need to stay there for about 30 days or so until your new house is ready and your divorce is final. I think I can get the buyer to let you stay in the house for up to 60 days at no charge, and why don't you forget about those repairs that are called for in the contract, too? Well, all we're going to do is raise the sale price by $30,000 on the contract. After the closing, you can give them the $30,000. They'll have the money for the furniture. You can stay for no charge. I mean, up for 60 days or so. Is that going to be long enough?
Well, we really need 90 to 120 days. But I mean, is that legal to change the price and then give them the money?
Well, look, I think I can get them to give you 120 days.
Well, I'll have to pay taxes on that $30,000, won't I? And is it okay to do that? I mean, will it be on the closing statement?
No. You won't pay a penny more in taxes because of the homestead capital gains exemption. And in addition, you're not going to have those extra expenses making those repairs. Plus, you get to stay for 120 days, gratis. Of course, if you need to.
But is it okay to do this, and will it be on the closing statement? And is it okay with my agent?
You don't need to talk to Bonnie at all. I'll take care of that, and the closing statement will show the new price.
But what about the $30,000 being given back to the buyer?
You don't have to worry about that. That's what I'm here for.
Are you going to call Bonnie?
Sure will, as soon as you tell me we got a deal.
Well, I guess so, as long as I can stay as long as I need to, and as long as I don't have to pay any taxes.
I'll make sure of that. Thanks a lot, Red. I'll see you next week at the closing.
Okay, see you there.
Come on in.
Hey, John.
Howdy.
What's up?
Well, we got the appraisal back on the LJ property, and it's $30,000 higher than the sales price.
Oh, really? I'm going to really hear it from Red.
Oh, I doubt that. I called him and talked to him about it. He's fine about it.
You called Red?
Yeah, don't get defensive here. I mean, we're going to put this thing together. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to raise the sales price by $30,000. Now, Red is going to give the $30,000 back to the buyers after closing so they can buy furniture and stuff for the new house. And in turn, they're going to let Red stay in the house for up to 120 days if he needs to. Now, they're not going to have to make any repairs, which is called for by the original contract. And here's the best part. You're going to make an additional commission on that $30,000 addition.
I don't know, John. Is this legal?
The HUD statement's going to show the new price, and everybody's going to be happy. Everybody reaps the benefits, including you. It's really the best way for everybody to get what they want in this deal. Tell you what, you get the sales contract fixed, and I'll tell the buyer the good news.
Okay, John, if you think it'll fly.
Hey, I'm in the business of making things fly.
All right, then I guess I'll call Tom, the buyer's agent, and let him know that we're raising the sales price and that we've got a deal. The seller's going to stay in the property 4 extra months, and we're raising the sales price $30,000, right?
Correct.
Okay.
then I'll have Tom call Howell, the closing attorney, and let him know about these new developments.
Hey Tom, it's Bonnie. Yeah, I know, it's raining where I am. I just wanted to let you know that on the LJ property, the buyers and the sellers have agreed.
As I know you saw in the preceding scenario, there are many people that cross that line from doing their job to doing what the law of Georgia now defines as criminal. I think one of the most important things to start off with that you as the real estate licensee needs to understand is who the buyers of these properties are. In the majority of mortgage fraud cases, these are not people who are going to be moving into the house. These are not people that are going to use the $30,000 to buy furniture. They are what we call straw buyers. More often than not, these are people who are investors who have been convinced to buy a piece of property that they'll never see and that they'll never live in, and have been paid $5,000 to $10,000 to purchase the property. Often, these people borrow money on a fraudulent loan application, but more common, these people have good credit scores and have been attracted to the fraud by the fraudsters. The main fraudster will keep the balance of that $30,000, probably using the money to pay the loan for a period of time, and then they'll flip the property at a higher rate. The next important thing that you need to understand is the role of the appraiser in the residential mortgage fraud scheme. In order for a lender to loan money to a fraudster or a group of fraudsters, there must be an appraisal justifying the loan amount. Now, appraisers are the experts at determining what the value of a property is from an objective appraisal standpoint. However, I believe that the best individual most situated to know what the true value of a piece of property is a real estate licensee. You understand the market, you understand the neighborhoods, you know when a piece of property is really worth, say, $150,000. When you encounter a purchase agreement for $300,000 and you know that there's an appraisal backing up that agreement and that loan, and you know that that is not a true and correct valuation of that property, then if you proceed with the deal and obtain a fee from the closing, you may find yourself guilty of residential mortgage fraud.
That's how much you're going to owe? That's how much I owe you? Okay. So look okay to the agents?
That looks good to me.
I need y'all to sign page 3. Red, there's your check. Y'all just sign page 3 and pass them on around for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Much love.
Right down here.
Covington Police Department. If everybody would please place your hands on top of the desk.
What's going on?
You're all being placed under arrest in an ongoing investigation concerning mortgage fraud.